There's a quiet war that happens inside you every day. You feel it when the alarm rings, when the task list stares back at you, when the weight of "I don't want to" presses down on your chest. It's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's resistance. The invisible gravity that keeps you orbiting the same habits, the same fears, the same comfort zone disguised as peace. Most people fight resistance with force. They grit their teeth, push through, and hope that someday discipline will become easier. But there's a higher way, a deeper form of mastery that doesn't fight resistance. It studies it. It looks at that inner heaviness not as an enemy, but as a doorway. That's the essence of real growth. It's not about erasing discomfort. It's about becoming conscious in the middle of it. You've been taught that success comes from effort, from pushing, striving, conquering. But what if the key to mastery was awareness, not aggression? What if every moment of hesitation, every impulse to avoid, was actually an invitation to wake up? Think about it. You're about to do something simple. Make the bed, open a difficult email, go for a run, and suddenly you feel that awful sinking in your gut. The mind whispers, "Later." It promises comfort if you delay. That's the voice that has ruled your life for years. But that voice is not the truth. It's the ego's fear of dissolution. It's the psychological equivalent of fog, shapeless, heavy, and gone the moment light shines through it. That light is awareness. Awareness is not thinking about the problem. It's looking directly at the sensation that says, "I don't want to." Not analyzing it, not trying to change it, but simply placing your attention on it. The moment you do, something magical happens. The fog begins to clear. What once felt unbearable starts to dissolve under the warmth of your attention. And you realize something profound. The discomfort was never the task itself. It was your resistance to it. The more you practice this, the more you see that resistance shows up everywhere. Brushing your teeth, sitting to meditate, cleaning your room, making that call. It's the same energy wearing different masks. Avoidance is just fear pretending to be fatigue. Procrastination is fear disguised as logic. Laziness is the body's rebellion against unconscious action. And all of them lose their power the instant you meet them with full awareness. This is what mastery looks like. Not the absence of difficulty, but the end of unconscious reaction. Mastery is not doing everything perfectly. It's doing everything consciously. When you bring awareness into an unpleasant moment, you dissolve the very force that made it unpleasant. You no longer need willpower, because awareness itself does the work. Imagine a craftsman who knows every movement of his hands, a musician who hears the silence between notes, a warrior who senses the battle before it begins. Their power comes not from muscle, but from presence. They have mastered awareness in action. Every gesture, every breath, every moment is infused with consciousness. That's the path to true character growth, to make awareness your default, even in the smallest things. Because if you can face the little resistances with awareness, you can face the great ones. The same energy that hesitates before brushing your teeth is the one that hides from your destiny. The battlefield is no different, only the scale changes. So start small. The next time you feel that awful internal pull, that invisible weight that says, "Not now," don't obey it. Don't fight it either. Just stop and look. Feel where it lives in your body. Notice the tension in your chest, the fog behind your eyes, the voice that whispers excuses. Watch it as if it were a storm passing across the sky. And while you watch, do the thing anyway, not out of force, but out of clarity. You're not fighting the resistance. You're dissolving it by seeing it. You're reminding yourself that discomfort cannot survive awareness. It's like holding ice in your hands until it melts. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. That's how transformation happens. Not in grand moments of motivation, but in silent acts of awareness repeated thousands of times. You brush your teeth while feeling the resistance and noticing it melt. You write that first sentence while your hands tremble with inertia. You clean that corner of your room that you've been ignoring for months. And with every small act done consciously, something inside you strengthens. The inner fog thins. The mind starts to trust itself again. This is real self-discipline, awareness moving through action. Because when you act with full attention, the division between me and the task disappears. There's no longer a doer and a deed, only doing. Effort becomes flow, pain becomes sensation, and life, in its raw simplicity, becomes meditation. At that point, work and rest are no longer opposites. Everything you do nourishes you, because everything you do is done in presence. Whether you're lifting a weight or sipping tea, your mind is still. The resistance has nowhere left to hide. That's when mastery begins to reveal its true face. Effortless intensity. You move through life like a clear river, flowing around obstacles instead of fighting them. You do what needs to be done, not out of obligation, but out of harmony with the moment. And this harmony is not learned from books or gurus. It's learned through direct experience, through meeting resistance again and again, until you realize that resistance was never the problem. It was the teacher. The real obstacle has always been unconsciousness. Forgetting that you are awareness itself. Every unpleasant feeling is simply an opportunity to remember. At first, this kind of awareness feels unnatural. You are so used to operating on autopilot that watching yourself in motion seems strange, even mechanical. But that is only because you've spent a lifetime running from discomfort instead of meeting it. The mind's first reaction to awareness is always restlessness. It wants to escape back into habit, into noise, into the next distraction. That is the moment when practice begins. You notice the impulse to run, and you don't. You stay. You breathe. You let the discomfort show you its shape. You begin to see that resistance is not an enemy, but a signal. It's the place in you that still believes growth should be painless. It's the voice that says, "I'll feel ready tomorrow," when the truth is that readiness never comes. Awareness is readiness. So you learn to act while still feeling fear, still feeling the gravity of hesitation, but no longer obeying it. You act consciously, with both the tension and the intention fully present. It feels different, heavier at first, then lighter. Eventually, it begins to feel like freedom. The old way was built on willpower. The new way is built on alignment. Willpower is like holding your breath underwater. It works for a time, but it cannot last. Awareness is like learning to breathe underwater. Once you remember how, effort disappears. Awareness doesn't exhaust you, it renews you. Think about every time you forced yourself to do something. The mind said, "Just push through." You did, but it cost energy. The resistance returned, stronger the next time. Forcing never dissolves resistance, it only buries it deeper. Awareness, on the other hand, uproots it. When you bring consciousness to a habit, you take the fuel away from it. You pull it out by the roots. That's why self-discipline without self-awareness turns into self-punishment. You become efficient at being unconscious. You perform the same motions but feel hollow. Life becomes a checklist rather than a living art. Mastery, though, is alive. It demands your full participation in each moment. It doesn't want your perfection. It wants your presence. When you live this way, simple acts become sacred rituals. You feel the weight of a spoon in your hand, the sound of footsteps on the floor, the temperature of the air as you move through it. The body becomes an instrument tuned to awareness. Every sense sharpens. Every gesture slows just enough for consciousness to enter. And then something subtle begins to happen. Resistance transforms into curiosity. Instead of shrinking from difficult tasks, you start leaning into them. Each challenge becomes a portal. You ask, what part of me is afraid right now? And when you bring light to that fear, you grow a little larger than it. Awareness expands, and what once felt unbearable becomes effortless. This is how the boundaries of the self dissolve, not through mystical visions, but through daily acts of attention. Each time you face discomfort with awareness, you reclaim another piece of energy that was trapped in avoidance. You gather yourself back into wholeness. Eventually, your relationship to difficulty changes completely. Pain stops being something to escape. It becomes information. You begin to sense that resistance always points to the next step of evolution. It's the compass of growth. Wherever you feel the most discomfort is exactly where consciousness is trying to wake up. That's why the masters of every craft seek challenge. The artist paints what scares him. The athlete trains where she is weakest. The mystic meditates in the places of deepest silence. They don't chase difficulty for ego's sake. They understand that evolution lives on the edge of resistance. Comfort never taught anyone to see. So you begin to live by a new principle. Move toward what you resist. Not recklessly, but consciously. When a task feels heavy, meet it first with awareness, then with action. Do not wait for motivation. Do not wait for the perfect mood. Motivation is the body's echo. Awareness is the cause. As this habit strengthens, your energy changes. You stop leaking power through hesitation. You stop negotiating with fear. Each conscious act becomes a small victory, not because the task was great, but because you stayed awake during it. And staying awake is the essence of mastery. From the outside, nothing looks different. You still go to work, talk to people, pay bills. But the inner quality has transformed. The same tasks that used to drain you now energize you. Awareness makes everything lighter because it removes the friction of resistance. You begin to sense that the line between discipline and joy was imaginary. When awareness enters, even repetition feels new. You wash the same dishes, yet the motion feels alive, like a dance. You type the same words, but they carry clarity instead of effort. Awareness turns work into meditation. Soon, you discover a deeper secret. Awareness reveals intelligence hidden inside every act. There is a way to brush your teeth that feels perfect, a way to breathe that feels effortless, a way to speak that feels exact and kind. The more aware you become, the more graceful your actions turn. Life becomes choreography directed by consciousness itself. And grace is the natural expression of mastery. This grace has nothing to do with talent or privilege. It belongs to anyone who is willing to stay awake through discomfort. It's available to the exhausted parent, the anxious student, the solitary worker, the seeker in silence. Awareness doesn't care who you are. It meets everyone at the same depth. When this grace begins to unfold, resistance still appears. But now it feels like weather, not fate. It passes quickly because you no longer hold on to it. You've learned to move with life instead of against it. You've discovered that the mind's heaviness cannot touch the lightness of being aware. That realization marks the turning point. Effort ceases to be suffering. You finally understand that the goal was never to eliminate resistance, but to integrate it, to turn the friction of growth into fuel for awareness itself. When you live this way long enough, something extraordinary begins to form within you, a new kind of strength. Not the strength of defiance or control, but the strength of calm, the strength of someone who no longer runs from experience. You become less dramatic, but more alive, less reactive, but more responsive. You start to notice that situations no longer throw you off balance as they once did. The storms still come, but the winds pass through you. Your center holds. This is what real character feels like. Not an identity you construct, but a stability that emerges from awareness. Character isn't a mask you wear. It's the absence of masks. It's the natural posture of a mind that no longer resists itself. The world calls it discipline. The mystics call it presence. They are the same thing. Because once awareness matures, effort transforms into elegance. You act without strain. You speak with precision. You work without tension. You rest without guilt. You are no longer being pulled between opposites, between desire and fear, doing and not doing. Your energy moves as one. People will notice the difference. They may say you've become more patient, more centered, more confident. But what they're really feeling is your alignment. You've stopped leaking power through inner conflict. You're no longer divided against yourself. When awareness deepens this far, every act becomes creative. Even the smallest thing, Tying your shoes, closing a door, making a cup of coffee carries an invisible intelligence. You begin to feel guided from within. The body seems to know what to do without consulting thought. You've entered the realm of effortless action. Ancient teachings called it Wu Wei, the art of doing without doing. It's not passivity, it's mastery beyond control. You have trained so deeply that awareness and action are no longer separate. The conscious and the instinctive have merged into one seamless movement. This is the true purpose of practice, not to become mechanical, but to transcend mechanics entirely. A musician practices scales so awareness can later improvise freely. A monk repeats prayers so that silence may one day pray through him. A warrior drills techniques until awareness fights without thought. Discipline is only a bridge to freedom. That's the paradox. Mastery begins with effort and ends with surrender. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving over. You stop trying to control the river and learn to flow with it. You realize that your highest intelligence is not in the mind that plans, but in the consciousness that observes. From that place, action becomes pure. You no longer do things to prove yourself or to avoid failure. You act because it feels natural to act. The task becomes its own reward. There's no separation between purpose and process. This is freedom in motion. The ego cannot understand this. It lives on comparison and tension. It asks, what will I gain? Awareness asks, what is required right now? The difference between the two is the difference between strain and grace. You start to see that all anxiety comes from trying to live in a moment that doesn't exist. The ego lives in the future. It wants results, validation, applause. Awareness lives here, where everything is already enough. And when you live here, mastery turns humble. You no longer need to show the world your progress. You are simply absorbed in the act. The great masters always appear simple because they no longer perform. They just are. The carpenter planes wood with reverence. The teacher speaks softly but clearly. The athlete moves like breath. Every action radiates quiet completeness. That quietness is not emptiness, it's fullness. It's the fullness of presence, filling every moment so completely that there's no room for conflict. Life feels like a single, continuous movement, one gesture of awareness unfolding through time. This is where character and mastery become one. Character is how awareness expresses itself through form. It's the consistency of inner truth showing up in outer behavior. It's not about perfection, but integrity, the alignment between what you know and what you do. And you discover that growth is not linear, it's circular. You keep returning to the same lessons, but each time from a higher vantage point. You face old fears with new clarity. You revisit familiar resistance with deeper patience. The spiral continues upward, infinite, graceful, inevitable. This is why true mastery never hardens into arrogance. The more aware you become, the more humble you feel, because you see how vast the field of consciousness is, and how small any individual achievement seems within it. You no longer say, I did this. You say, it was done through me. The doer dissolves into doing. And this humility gives birth to compassion. Because when you see your own resistance dissolve, you understand others more deeply. You recognize that everyone is fighting the same invisible war within themselves. You stop judging. You start seeing. You meet others with the same patience that freed you. That's when you realize that mastery was never just about skill or discipline. It was about love. Love for the process, love for the present, love for life itself. Awareness without love becomes cold observation. Love without awareness becomes blind attachment. Together, they form the heart of mastery, the intelligence of stillness moving through compassion. You look around and everything feels connected. The way sunlight hits the floor, the way air moves through trees, the way your breath enters and leaves your body, all of it feels synchronized, effortless, precise. You no longer try to control life, you collaborate with it. And in this collaboration, the idea of resistance loses meaning. What's left is flow. Flow not as excitement or intensity, but as perfect cooperation with reality. You've stopped demanding that life obey you. Instead, you've learned to listen. You've realized that awareness was never about control, it was about participation. You are no longer separate from the world you once tried to master. You have become part of its rhythm. You have become the rhythm itself. And when awareness deepens this far, even the idea of mastery begins to dissolve. The mind no longer says, "I am mastering life." It simply experiences life mastering itself through you. Every breath, every glance, every motion unfolds perfectly on its own. You start to notice that stillness follows you everywhere. It's not something you create, it's something that remains when the noise ends. You sit in silence and realize the silence was never outside you. It was your nature all along. The world moves, people rush, seasons turn, yet beneath it all there's a current of peace that never stirs. That peace becomes your home, not a state you visit, but the atmosphere you live in. From it you act naturally, clearly, without hesitation. Decisions no longer feel like calculations, they feel like recognition. You simply know what to do, because there is no gap between seeing and doing. Awareness and action are one continuous movement. This is the birth of true character, not the personality that changes with circumstance, but the essence that remains steady through all of them. It isn't built, it's revealed. It's the residue of countless small moments of awareness, of every time you met resistance instead of fleeing it, every time you chose presence over distraction, every time you moved with love instead of fear. Character is consciousness made visible. In this state, you stop needing grand visions of success. You stop measuring progress. Each moment is complete. Work becomes prayer. Rest becomes devotion. The boundary between spiritual and ordinary life disappears. The divine is not elsewhere. It is here, shining through every act performed with attention. People ask, how do I maintain this? The answer is, you don't. Awareness maintains itself. You only fall out of it when you try to possess it. The same mind that seeks enlightenment cannot keep it, because enlightenment is the absence of seeking. So you let go. You surrender even the idea of being awake, and in that surrender, you awaken more deeply. This surrender is not passive, it's alive. It's the humility of being fully human while knowing you are more than human. You laugh more easily, you forgive more quickly, you love without agenda. You see beauty in imperfection because you understand that imperfection is the shape awareness takes while learning to see itself. You realize that the path was never about reaching some distant summit. It was about uncovering the clarity that was already here, hidden beneath layers of resistance. Every challenge was an invitation to return home. Every failure was a reminder to wake up. Every moment of doubt was the mind's way of saying, look closer. And so you do, you look closer at everything. At your thoughts, at the sky, at the face of a stranger. You begin to see patterns of grace woven through everything you once called chaos. What once looked random now feels orchestrated. What once felt heavy now feels precise. The entire world starts to appear as a living expression of awareness meeting itself. You no longer think of growth as effort. You think of it as refinement, polishing the lens through which light passes. Each day, awareness shines a little more clearly through the personality, through the body, through the actions you take. You don't become someone new, you become transparent to what has always been. That transparency is freedom. The fear of failure evaporates, because you see there is no failure, only feedback. The fear of judgment disappears because you realize everyone is fighting the same illusions. Even the fear of death softens, because awareness knows it cannot die. It only changes form, just as waves become ocean again. This understanding brings a new kind of joy. Quiet, deep, unshakable. It's not the joy of excitement, but the joy of truth recognized. You no longer depend on circumstances to feel alive. You are aliveness itself, and with that realization, your relationship to others changes. You no longer try to teach them, fix them, or persuade them. You simply embody clarity. People feel peace around you not because you give it to them, but because they recognize it in themselves. Presence teaches silently. You find yourself drawn to simplicity. You need less. You speak less. You act when it's time, and rest when it's time, without guilt or analysis. Life unfolds like music, and you are both the listener and the melody. Sometimes the old patterns still appear: tiredness, impatience, moments of forgetfulness. But now they're brief, almost tender. You don't resist them. You welcome them back into awareness. You realize that even forgetting is part of remembering. Awareness holds everything, even its own absence. And so, mastery becomes indistinguishable from stillness. You no longer measure your strength by how much you can control, but by how deeply you can allow. You trust the intelligence that beats your heart, grows your cells, turns galaxies. That same intelligence moves your hands, shapes your words, directs your days. You are no longer separate from it. You are it. This is the final lesson of growth, that nothing real can be achieved through resistance. Awareness was the beginning, the middle, and the end. What looked like a long journey was a single step repeated in infinite forms. See, accept, act consciously. When you finally see that, the search ends. The teacher and the student dissolve into the same awareness. Life continues, but it feels like a dance performed by no one. Each moment arrives, perfect and complete, and in the quiet of that realization you whisper, not as a thought, but as understanding itself: I am awareness. I am the stillness behind all doing, and everything I do is done through love. Then there is nothing left to master, only life, flowing effortlessly as you.